everyone, so today's video is going to be all about travelling and how I travel on a budget. This video was actually requested quite a while ago now, so I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to film it. Hopefully it might be helpful to some of you guys if you're planning some future trips away. If you've seen any of my past videos, you will probably know that I am quite the cheapskate. I like to do everything on a budget pretty much, mainly so I can save up my money to then go on holiday / go travelling, but then even when I'm travelling I still like to do it as cheap as possible. So I feel like I've picked up a few little bits over the past few years. I've actually written some notes for this video. I've taken it very seriously, so I guess it makes sense to kind of give you a brief overview of like my experience travelling, when I started travelling, what I mean by travelling, etc. So I feel like most people, when they say travelling, they imagine the sort of gap year experience of going around Southeast Asia or anything like that. I have not done that, so I will not be touching on that in this video. I have been interrailing, which I guess is more kind of typical travelling. I went round multiple places in Europe for a month with my friends at the end of sixth form before I went to university. So I will touch on some of that sort of stuff and like backpacking and going through hostels and catching trains and things. So that's sort of my experience. My first holiday without my parents was at the end of my first year of sixth form. So I was 16. I went to Paris with some friends for a couple of days. I actually can't remember how long we were there for. I think it was like 3 or 4 days. So that was my first holiday. Like I mentioned, the following summer I then went interrailing, and then since then I've had the sort of travel bug, and I've pretty much gone on holiday maybe like 3 or 4 times a year every year while I was at university. Please excuse if you can hear the ice cream van in the background. I completely have now lost my train of thought, but basically I feel like because I've been away, I feel like that's quite a high amount for while someone's at university. I don't know if that's just me, maybe it's not, but I feel like I'm in a position where I can discuss how I did it cheaply, because those holidays that I went on while I was at uni definitely weren't expensive trips. Each time I went away for maybe like 3 or 4 days, a few week holidays in there as well, but all of it was on a budget, all of it was very affordable, and I'm going to be sharing with you guys how I managed to do that. So I'm going to start off by talking about flights, because I feel like this is normally one of the biggest expenses when it comes to going on holiday, and I feel like my biggest piece of advice when it comes to flying somewhere is to choose your holiday destination based on where it is cheap to fly to at that moment in time, which sounds a bit silly, but if you're not set on a destination and you just kind of want to go explore, you want to go on holiday, you've got the holiday bug and you're like, just take me somewhere other than England, this is definitely the cheapest way to go on holiday ever. It's what I've done with majority of the holidays I've been on, because it just means A, you get to see a place that you maybe wouldn't have chosen otherwise and you wouldn't have seen otherwise, and B, you get such a cheaper holiday. When you get flights for say 20 quid return, it makes the whole holiday significantly cheaper because you've paid next to nothing to get to the place in the first place. So this is definitely something I did all the time. I would go on websites like EasyJet, Ryanair, places like that, see the dates that I want to travel and then see which places are the cheapest to fly to. Also, if you're flexible with dates, that makes things a whole lot cheaper as well. If you, when you're looking at flights, kind of do the whole like week view, and then you can see, oh, if I fly out on a Tuesday instead of a Saturday, it's £50 cheaper. That works out really well as well. Obviously, that's easier in some cases than it is in others. If you're at university, it's a great time because, well, for me at least, I was pretty flexible with the dates that I went to university, so I was very flexible on when I could fly, so that's definitely a big tip as well. Also, if you look at the places that the kind of airline companies do holiday packages to, not necessarily to buy the holiday package, but normally the cheapest ones of them are a combination of the cheapest flights they offer and a place that's fairly cheap to get accommodation in. So I would go on the EasyJet like holidays section, see where they would recommend for the dates that I put in, and kind of go with the cheapest, and say it's like Greece, then I would know that Greece is a cheap place to fly to on the dates that I'm looking, and I would be able to find accommodation for an affordable price as well, even if I didn't then go with the holiday package that they were suggesting, if that makes sense. If you are set on a holiday destination, however, I would definitely recommend going on some comparison sites, seeing where you can find the cheapest flights, seeing which airline's the cheapest, seeing if like taking a different route there is cheaper, seeing if flying out with one company but flying back with a different company is cheaper. That is what I'm doing for my next holiday to Cyprus. We're flying with 2 different airline companies because that worked out a lot cheaper. So definitely check out sites like that. I will say, when it comes to booking flights with kind of the more affordable airline companies like EasyJet, like Ryanair, places like that, just be wary of the extra costs that they sometimes throw in there. They like to add, like, I think Ryanair at the moment, their policy is crazy. I don't know the exact sort of rules, but they charge you extra to like sit next to someone, to bring a different bag, to like, it's just insane. So definitely read that beforehand, because when you kind of add all the extra costs, sometimes it works out being more expensive than if you'd just chosen like a more expensive flight in the first place. Also, on the topic of sort of like hand luggage and extra costs for baggage and things like that, I pretty much always only travel with hand luggage, which saves a significant amount of money because I don't have to pay the money for a checked bag. So I think if you can pack lightly, I would 1,000,000% recommend packing as lightly as possible and just taking your hand luggage with you. I mean, it's easier anyway. You don't have to carry a big bag. You don't have to pay the extra cost to check in a bag. You don't have to wait for your bag to like arrive once you've got off the plane. Just in general, it's easier, and I think if you're in a position where you can pack lightly, just do it. If you're not and you're going on holiday with quite a few people, you could always share like one checked bag between you. That's what I've done in a past like girls holiday. 4 of us went to Bulgaria and we just bought one checked bag between us, so we all sort of like packed our hand luggage as we would if we were traveling just with hand luggage, but then we had that extra space where we could put some more stuff in the checked bag as well. We could bring bigger liquids with us and things like that, so we just shared one checked bag, and it meant that we could split the costs 4 ways, and it definitely wasn't as expensive as it would have been. So now moving on to like accommodation and where you're going to stay when you're traveling. I pretty much always stay in Airbnbs. I love Airbnbs. I feel like I could be a spokesperson for Airbnb because I have used it so much. I just love it. I love having my own home, like a whole place to myself on holiday. Much prefer it to a hotel. I mean, they both have like pros and cons. The hotel has sort of like the luxury, you get a cleaner, you get things like that, but I just feel like Airbnbs for me are so much better. You have your own cooking facilities, which for me has saved me a lot of money in the past because it's meant that I've not had to eat out every single night of that holiday. I mean, it's great eating out and I feel like food is such a good part of going traveling, but it meant that, say for breakfast, I could make porridge or something because I would have a stovetop to do that, or cups of tea, making packed lunches, making some dinners in the evenings that you don't want to go out. It just ends up saving a lot of money having those cooking facilities. I will say, when it comes to finding a good Airbnb, definitely do your research. Don't just go with the cheapest one or the first one that you find that looks cool. Read the reviews, check out the location, see how far it is from like the places that you'll want to be going to, message the Airbnb host and ask how to get from the airport to the Airbnb. This is something I do every single time, and it's so important because sometimes the Airbnbs are in like weird places and it's impossible to get there by public transport. Other times the host has been really lovely and has offered to pick me up from the airport to take me to the Airbnb, which obviously saves a big cost, so definitely recommend doing that. Also, in terms of location, checking it's in a safe place, because hotels are normally more central. Airbnbs can sort of be more like houses and homes because that's literally what they are, so they can sometimes be in more rogue places, so definitely check out the location and how safe the area is. Also, use discount codes for Airbnb. I will link my little like Airbnb discount code thing in the description. It's not like a sponsored thing or anything. Anyone that's on Airbnb has their own code that they can give people, and it means that if you use my code, you then get money off your first Airbnb, and then I think in return I might get money off an Airbnb. I have no idea how it works, but if you get money off, pretty good going. I've done that more times than I should have with Airbnb because I have created different accounts, which I shouldn't admit, but like if I'm traveling with someone else and they've not used Airbnb in the past, we'll use their account because it means that we then get discount off, if that makes sense. So definitely take advantage of that. You can get it a little bit cheaper. Every little helps. And yeah, I feel like that's what I would have to say about Airbnbs. I think if you are set on not using Airbnbs and you want to use hotels or hostels, again, check comparison sites. I feel like they're so helpful at finding a good deal. Also, read the reviews. I can't stress this enough, especially with hostels. When we went interrailing, we stayed in I think like four or five hostels, and they were all very different experiences. I feel like no one hostel is like another hostel, so read the reviews and make sure you're going to a place that you're going to be comfortable. Everyone has got different things that they want to get out of a hostel. If you want to go to a party hostel, go for a party hostel. If you're wanting to have a very cultural trip and you're going to want early nights and get up early so you can see as much of the city as possible, maybe don't go for a party hostel where you're going to be woken up at 3 AM by drunk people coming into your room. So definitely look into those sorts of things. If you're traveling by yourself, look at like what sorts of rooms you want to be staying in. If you want to be in like a same-sex dorm and you don't want to, just look into it. Make sure you know what you're getting out of the hostel that you're kind of going for. I definitely think hostels have a time and a place, and I think they can be so good for saving money, especially when we were traveling as a big group for when we were interrailing. They were so great because they were so cheap. Also, when I went traveling by myself around Italy, I stayed in hostels, so I have stayed in them by myself as well. That was definitely a completely different experience. So just know what you're comfortable with and then take that into consideration when you're looking for hostels, and kind of prioritize that over the cost of them. I think if you're going to be spending a few more pounds because you're going to be in a place that you feel more safe and more comfortable, spend the extra pounds. Like, there's a time and a place where you need to budget, and if your safety is coming into it, like, just choose the safer option, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have to do everything in the cheapest place as possible. And then in terms of more sort of just like general cheap traveling tips, I would say look into the country that you're planning on visiting and their costs first. So before you've booked flights, before you've booked accommodation, just sort of have a Google on how much things are there, like food, drinks, anything you plan on doing there, because obviously some places are way more expensive than others. That is something that was very apparent doing interrailing. Some of the European countries we went to were so expensive, and then we'd go to another one and it would be so cheap. So there are some really good websites out there which kind of give you an overview of like a general list of things you can buy in that country. And I go on that website so often to compare prices for things like, I think they usually say like McDonald's as like a standard, and you can see the price of a McDonald's in all these different countries, or the price of a beer, or the price of a loaf of bread, a price of like a pint of milk, and it just gives you like a rough idea of the sort of how expensive the country is that you're visiting. I don't think that it should put you off if you're visiting a particularly expensive country, but it's nice to like kind of know and be prepared before you go, so you kind of like have enough money to cover the trip. Also, in terms of traveling while you're in the country, if you're say doing interrailing, or maybe if you're backpacking, obviously I've not done backpacking around anywhere other than Europe, so I can't really speak on behalf of that, but from my experience I would say definitely look into the public transport before you go. So before you go to any country, whether you're traveling to a different country from it or not, look into the public transport. It makes everything so much easier when you've kind of got an idea how to get from one place to another, how expensive it's going to be, what the cheaper options are. Say they have like a metro that's better than the bus, or they have a tram or whatever else. It's definitely just more reassuring to know what you're getting into before you arrive. Also, when you're traveling, if you can walk places, walk to as many places as you can. Obviously it's cheaper, and you get to see way more of the town or the city that you're in that you probably wouldn't have seen if you're on the metro. So that's another thing that I would definitely recommend. And then finally, in terms of like interrailing, I would say look into the idea of booking trains separately rather than buying an interrail pass. So that's what I ended up doing. I didn't technically go interrailing because I didn't have an interrailing pass, but I went traveling around Europe on trains. So it's the same thing as interrailing, but we just booked them individually as trains from each place to the next place, because that just ended up working out cheaper for us. So if interrailing is something that you're considering, definitely look into that as well. Interrailing with like the actual pass obviously has some benefits over having individual tickets, so you have to kind of weigh up those different negatives and positives. But for me, buying the individual train tickets worked out great, and it saved us quite a bit of money, so that's what we ended up doing. And then I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope some of these tips have maybe been helpful to some of you guys. Let me know if you have any travel plans sorted, because I'm so interested. I love talking about travel and people's holidays and going on holiday. My next trip is to Cyprus in less than 2 months now, so I'm super excited about that. If you guys have any other videos around travel that you would like me to make, definitely leave them in a comment down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!